Okay, another thing that beginning smiths will run into, which is probably more basic than just tapering and drawing metal out, but is rounding and keeping metal square. So actually I will switch to this piece. Couldn't find the metal I wanted to use, but I'm not going to waste a heat though. And here I don't want to draw out too quickly at this point, because I want to keep about a 1/4 inch taper. But right there I had to straighten it up, and that's what I wanted to go over next with. Now you'll notice that you see me brushing the metal. The reason for that is you see all this slag here. If we were to keep pounding that into the metal, it produces a very rough looking scale. And that'd be an example right there. You see how it's very rough? That is all scale that was left on and pounded into the metal. So at a red heat, it's a good idea periodically to brush the metal off if you're starting to get a buildup of scale or slag. It's commonly referred to as scale, but it's the same thing as slag within welding. So I'm going to take this round bar and I'm going to square it. Whenever we draw metal out, it always needs to be square, and then we take it down to a point. And if you want it round, then it needs to be rounded to that at that time. The reason for that is if you try to just round metal and draw it out in a round shape, it'll eventually do split ends at the end of the metal, like on hair when it's not taken care of. The ends will split. Same thing will happen with the metal. So on this, it's round stock. I'm going to take it square and then round it. But before I round it, I'm going to take it into a point of a diamond shape. It's not going to be perfectly square. I'm going to try and squash it to give you an example of how to correct when that happens. And you're going to run into it as a beginning smith. You're trying to square out a piece of round stock, and it looks more like a diamond and it's not square. You want to keep it as square as you can. If it starts to get diamond shape, you want to correct the problem sooner rather than later. So we're going to take a nice heat. So I'm going to do the correct way first. Get a couple of good hits up top. Turn it 90 degrees. Pound it down even. And we're going to work two sides. If you notice, as I pound, I only am working two sides. It's a lot quicker of a method. There I went to another side just to straighten on my anvil. But if we have a good flat surface here, we have our hammer here, when we are drawing metal out, we really only need to work two sides. It's quicker to flip back and forth, and it takes practice. It's quicker to do that than it is to try and do all four sides. And there's no need to. You just need to do the two sides, because the other face is going to take care of the rest. And as you can see, we've got a pretty good square going there. So now I'm going to flatten that out to a diamond shape. And this is a very common thing that happens with beginning smiths, is you end up with a diamond shape, so how can you keep it square? So I'm going to set it to diamond, and I'll show you how to correct that. Okay, now that's pretty common of what you're going to run into when you first try to draw metal out or take round stock to a square stock. Very common, but correctable. And you're going to want to take it back up to the higher heat ranges, closer to a yellow if you can. I've actually had it diamond on me so much that I can correct it at a red heat, but it's a lot harder to do. So I'm going to bring it up to a nice color. then we're going to take that high point up, we're going to pound it back down. Essentially, almost make it round. And then we're going to come back. Keeping our 90. So as you can see, we're back to square. The tip looks a little round. Hopefully you can see. I guess you can look. Let me square up that tip a little bit so you can see the rest. I'm going to taper it down so you can see the rest of the... Yeah, there we go. That looks a little better. So now we're back to a pretty good square that we could draw the point out on and then round if we needed to. But the reason, that's what I was going to say, I just forgot for a second. The reason why we need to address that problem, if you start noticing that it's becoming a diamond rather than square, you need to correct it sooner than later, because you saw how much smaller that square is. Whenever it starts to go to a diamond, you're going to need to bring it back to square sooner rather than later, because if you wait too long, it's going to be real small, and if you're hitting for a target diameter, you're going to miss it. And then you're going to have to upset, which is very hard. Okay? That was a little hot on the heat. So now I'm going to take this on out to a point. Very carefully. Working my heat back up. Squaring it off. Okay, now we want to put it back to round, okay, to match our stock. The way we're going to do that is we're going to hit, much in the way of correcting a diamond, we're going to hit up on the top on one point, hit up on the top with this point, and then we're just going to basically make a hexagon or octagon out of it and just keep working it around until we get it round. Another very basic and good practice. A lot of times I'll do this if I'm having a problem with a project that's giving me troubles or whatever. I'll just grab a piece of rebar, square it, round it, melt it, just play with it, and usually I can go back to my project and my problem will find a solution. Okay? So we're going to have the high points up here. I'm going to start down at the tip because it cools off the fastest. I'm real light down there because it's thin. I'll usually use a smaller hammer sometimes on that one. And now I'm just basically pounding down the points nice and even. Still only two sides is all that's needed. Until it gets down to almost round. And the more you heat it, and the more you work it, the rounder it'll become. So depending on what you want to do, you may not want to round it up too much. You know, we put that back to round. I did quite a bit of blows, so it's pretty clean. If you wanted it to look more like vines, you may spend a little less time with the hammer on that. So that's just some of the real basic techniques that a beginning smith should be starting in with within hammer control, utilizing the horn to draw metal out. If you happen to have a bottom fuller, you can do the same thing as I do on the horn, and you can draw out too. The horn's a little bit wider of a fuller, so it'll move the metal less than this will in any given direction. Sometimes a little easier, but that's just some of the basics that I use on an almost everyday basis. So I hope that kind of helps anybody who's looking at getting into blacksmithing. Alright, you guys have found it safe and have a good day. Thanks.